Hey guys, what's up? So now we have been able to log in a user. We can make sure they don't access the protected pages like listing contacts. So in this one, we'll be able to retrieve the user's contacts and show them on the screen. So if we go to the API and go to the contacts endpoint, you can see that when you execute it, you get this list of contacts. So this is what we want to make a request from the Axios and then receive those and display them on the UI. So for us to do that, I'm gonna come to the container. So the container for contacts is here. So for now, what we are doing is we are saying get contacts, and that's all we are doing. So what we want to do is we need to get them, of course. So actually, let me log in here. Oh, so let me go to login. We haven't implemented logout. So let me go to login. So now if we log in, let me log in. Okay. Let me open the DevTools. Always comes in handy. And then you can see that we get the data is brought in. We are actually making the requests already. So we need to be able to send this to reader we need to be able to send this to the reducer and then read it in the components. So now what we are doing is we are calling it, but now we are not sending a dispatch to the action. So here we have this action get contacts. So what it does, it makes a request, then logs the responses. So what we want is be able to dispatch these to the reducers. So the only way we can do that is having access to the dispatch function. And currently the way we get that is we need to select it. So if you could revisit our global state, so here in the provider, you can see that we have a contacts dispatch. So we need to use this. So here in the contacts, we can actually select it. So we can select it, then we say use context and pass that context. We will be able to get access to the values, and now we destructure it out. Okay, so once we get it, we can now send it also here to the action. So on the action, which is here, we can also expect it. So we can expect the dispatch. Okay, so once we have the dispatch, here, since we are going to need to show a loading indicator when we are loading them, so we can first dispatch like load contacts loading. So we'll have a type to be contacts loading, and we need to create it. Then we'll have another one. So here, once we have a success, once they are sent back to us, we can also dispatch another one. So I'm actually going to copy this. So we'll dispatch contacts load success. So once we get the success, we also need to be able to send what we get from the server to the reducer. So we can add payload here, and then we set it to res.data since the responses are in data. So if there is an error, we are gonna do the same thing, but in this way, we will dispatch contacts load error, and of course we need to create these types. So this is gonna be error dot response dot data. So this actually brings me to a point where I noticed that we've been doing error dot response dot data even when we are not checking if this is there. So if you get an error that comes in from the request initiation, let's say you don't have an active internet connection, that error, this will actually fail. So we want to check if we have the errors from the server. Otherwise, we can set something like could not connect to server. So I'm actually going to create a constant to connection error. I'm going to call it connection error. So let's create this constant and also our types. So if you go to our constants, so we're going to the same place actually. So you notice that we have action types. So I'm going to create another folder called something like API js.js. So in here we can have that error, export const. It's going to be equal to something like could not connect. Okay, so let's make sure we're importing it. So connection error. Okay, so let's have these types. So we can go to our action types. So export this. So export const loading will be loading. So this is gonna be load underscore success. So the rest one is gonna be load underscore error. Okay, so when we come back here, let's make sure the imports are coming through. So G S R. Okay, looking good. So now that we have the dispatch, we can dispatch the reducer. So let's go to the reducers. So first off, we want to check if we have an error. So we can switch. So case, we can define case. So it's gonna be loading. So contacts loading. So in this case, we want to return that the contacts are loading. So if you look at our initial state, we have contacts, we have add contact. So we want contacts. So we can return an object, a new object with contacts. Okay, so we want to get everything that is there. Okay, so first off, actually we need to first spread all the state so we don't override anything. Then we want to keep everything that is there, so we can do state.contacts. And then we want to change the loading. So we can change loading and set it to true. Okay, so we're gonna have something similar. So we're gonna copy this case, duplicate it 2 times for the error and the success. It's gonna be contact load success. It's gonna be contact load error. So once it's successful, we want to turn the load to false, of course. Once there is an error, we want to turn the loading to false. So once it's successful, we need to, if we look at our initial state, which is here, we need to have like a list. So I'm gonna actually have data there. So data is gonna be null. Data is gonna be an empty array by default. So once we have the success, now we can set the data to the payload. So we can do payload. So I notice we don't have payload here. So this action is the one that contains that payload. So we can have payload there. Also, we can destructure the type, and also make sure that now here we are just using the destructured property. So we set this to payload. Good. Okay, so once there is an error, we also want to turn to false, and then we set it to payload. So error will be equal to payload. Okay, so now let's go back and see if we can get these updates in the UI. If we go to our container, looking at our state in context provider, so we have contact state. So let's also destructure it. So we can do that here. If we do a console log for it, we should be able to see if we can get updates. So console log that. So let me remove this. So this log is not useful. So if we come back over here, nothing is happening. But if we take a look at the states here, at first we have loading false. Taking a look at this, loading is still false. Oh yeah. So if we come here we have loading true. So here we have loading false, but we have the data, you see. So yeah, in that we get all this in the component. So now what we're going to need to do is show a loading indicator when we are loading. So we can actually do that if we go to the semantic documentation. You can quickly search for a placeholder. So we're gonna use something like this. So I'm gonna actually cut this one out, copy this. So right now we are loading everything here, and we're gonna be refactoring it, of course. So for now, we are going to be returning the UI. So we're gonna call it contacts list UI, and then we are going to be giving it all this state. So we can give it like, so the state is going to be the contacts state. So contact state, no, not this. So let me call it contacts state. So we can actually call it state here. Okay, so let's create the contacts UI, the contacts list UI. So in our layout, which is here, we can create a new folder called contacts. So in there, I'm going to have another folder called list. So now we can have the UI. It's going to be called index.js. So it's going to be a simple function. So let's call it contacts UI. I will copy the text later. Okay, so if you take a look here, we are sending the state which will contain loading, data, and error. So if we come here, we can destructure those. So we can have loading, error, and data. So here we can check if we are loading. So we can do something like loading, and then we can show our placeholders. So we can show this. Okay, so let's first see which name we are using here, contacts list UI. Let's copy it and make sure we are using it here, and we are exporting it. Okay, let's import the placeholder. Okay, looking good. So let's make the import okay here. Okay, so if we come back, what's happening? Let's reload. Okay, so nothing is happening. So let's try to examine this. So contacts container is returning this. So if we go there, let's see where we're importing it from. Layout list. Oh, that's fine. So we are bringing this. We are returning. Okay. So you're saying if loading, let's console log these values here. Let's also have data. Let's come back. It's gonna reload. Oh, so they're undefined. We need to check how we are sending them. So that would be okay, so we are sending them as state. So we need to destructure them from state. Date state, then that. Let's check again. They're still undefined. Okay, so we can actually have props here. So we can have all the props, and then we console log those. Here I'm gonna have true for now. So let's take a look at the props. So if we reload, get that loading stuff. So in the props we have state. So in state we have contacts. Okay, so this makes sense now. So let's do this. So we have state, then we have contacts. So we can also destructure again. So contacts, then set those to this. And this should be like this. Okay, so let's take a look. So now we get the load, and then it goes away when there is data. So let's see how to display the data once the load is done doing its business. So what we can do is we are going to use a list component. So outside the loading, like here, we can now have a list from semantic. So on this list, we are going to need to be showing list items, meaning that we are going to have to map over this data. So right here, we can first check if data is greater than 0. So remember the initial state sets it to empty. So we need to check if they are more than 1. So what we do if they are more than 0. So what we do is we can check if data.length, and that will, for a 0 it will be false. So if .length is true, then it means they are more than 0. So now we can map over them. So we can do data.map. So this gives us an element. So that gives us the element. So what we want to do is return a list item. So we're going to return a semantic list. So it's going to be list.item. Okay, so in here, let's see what's happening here. Do we need to do this? Oh, it's because we don't have stuff in here. So anyway, so I'm going to wrap it in this. And then in the list.item, Now we can have the content. So here we can have list.content. So inside we can have the first name, last name, we can have the bio, we can have the bio stuff. So I'm gonna use an image here. So image, the source is going to be this contact. Actually, let me rename this to contact. It's gonna be contact dot. Let's take a look here. So contacts have this contact picture, so that's what we want. Okay, so from there, now we want to have the phone numbers on the right. So we can have another list content like this. Then I can have a floated equals right. So in here we can show the contact.phone number. So I can have a span here. So let me keep it open. So you can have that, and then we have a span closed off. Of course, you don't need this. So you can have contact.phone underscore number. Okay, so let's take a look. So we are having, oh, I noticed we actually need this opening one there. We need another one here. Okay, that's good. So if we have a list content floated to the right, we show the phone number, the content on the, so this is going to be the image. Let's import it. So the source is going to be the contact picture. And of course, we are going to be changing this one later to use the image thumbnail that shows those initials once there is no picture. But for now, let's first work on getting that data displayed. So also, we want the first name and last name. So somewhere here, after the image, I'm going to have another span. So it's going to be showing the first name and last name. So I can copy this. Then I'm going to have another one. So it's going to be first underscore name. It's going to be last underscore name. Okay, so once we come back here, you can see that it loads and then it shows our contacts. So these contacts are actually pretty huge, like so huge. So let me cross this so we take a look properly. Oh goodness, this is insane. So we reload, it shows, and then oh, the images are insane. So I'm going to change the size of these images here. So you can actually give them a width. I'm going to set this one to 65. So if it loads again, it shows the images are quite smaller. I believe it's also bigger, so I'm going to set it to 45. So that's going to go ahead and yeah. So these are quite small. So these are quite small enough. So I'm going to wrap everything in a container because they are quite stuck there and here. We are also missing our header, so we need to bring those ones in. So here we need the app header. So we need the header. Let's import ours. And also, so that should do it. Put the header there. So also I want to have the names on the right. But before we do that, let me put everything in a container so they can fit better. So we can have a container here from semantic. So we need to cross this one down, of course. So cut this one off. Yeah, so I'm gonna make this one come here after the header so that it wraps over everything. So before the closing div, we can now close it. So let's come back and see. Okay, so now they are here, looking good. So it's loading. Hopefully they will show. So after a while, they come and show. Okay, so looking good. Let's move this one to the side. So if we take a look at where we have these spans, so this, we can have this one inside this content, this span inside the content. So I'm gonna cut it out and bring it inside this content. Let's see how that one is. So it's also not going there. So I'm gonna add a class here. Actually, I can add a simple style, and I can display them flex, display flex. So let's see. Okay, so that puts it to the right, although it's not like directly in the center. So what you can do is also add align items in the center. All right, so that's gonna go ahead and add it to the center. So you probably would want this to be circular. So what you can do is actually add this prop here for circular. So it's gonna do the same thing. Load, and then the images are circular. So though they are quite, some are not fitting well, we're gonna go ahead and work on it. So for it to be equal, you can actually also add another height here. So you can add height equals the same as the width. So once it reloads, you will notice that the sizes are equal. So great, this is well and good. We can now retrieve our contacts. So guys, thanks for watching. In the next video, we will go ahead and start working on create contacts, and then we will be trimming this UI of course later. So if you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.